and welcome to the editorial analysis of the Hindu. Today we shall be discussing the editorial of the 9th of August. So coming to the first article, economic milestone and a poignant anniversary. Now basically this year marks the 50th year of bank nationalization. For the first time, bank nationalization is what took place in the year 1969. It was in this particular year that firstly 14 private banks were what were nationalized. Later in the year 1980, again 6 private banks were what were nationalized. So in that particular context, this editorial has been written, and largely it is a summary or a history of the entire movement or all the steps that have been taken in the context of the banking sector of India. So indeed the article is relevant. Coming to the issues, first and foremost, the editorial highlights that this was what was a watershed moment for India, not only for India, for the entire world. The editorial is highlighting that nowhere in the world has such kind of an experiment ever taken place, and that too at such a scale. So India was one unique country where this kind of an experiment is what did take place, and this is what was very much beneficial. Now what were these benefits? The benefits were primarily with regards to the rural areas. Now the editorial is giving us some data where it is saying that if in the rural areas at the time of independence 100 rupee was what was the loan on a person, then out of this 93 rupees was what was taken from non-institutional sources like money lenders, landlord, traders. So that was one problem that India was facing primarily in the rural areas, that banks were not there in the rural areas. However, with this nationalization, this scenario entirely changed, and by the year 1992, institutional loans in the rural areas are what increased from 16.9% at the time of independence to finally 64%. So this was what was the increase till the year 1992. So this is one data that has been given, and that was the primary benefit of nationalization of banks. After this also several steps were what were taken by the government. First and foremost was the new branch licensing policy that the government came up with. Once it nationalized the banks, it came up with these newer steps. Under this new licensing policy, what the government asserted was that if a bank is opening one branch in a metropolitan region, then 4 branches have to be opened in rural areas. So this 1:4 ratio was what was advocated by the government. Then the government came up with the idea of priority sector lending, where 40% of the loans were what were to be given to priority sectors like agriculture, small and medium enterprises, housing, education, and the weaker sections of the society. Another thing that the government came up was with differential interest rates. This is the concept that came up in the year 1974. Again, an important concept. Here the government said that depending on the person, the banks have to set up an interest rate, which means for the poor people, for example for the farmers, the interest rate has to be much lower as compared to corporate loans. So that is one thing that the government had suggested. Then it came up with the idea of the lead bank scheme. This was in the year 1969. Here the idea was that there will be one bank in the rural areas which will act as the lead bank, which will be responsible for the rural branches of any other bank in that particular region. And under this came the idea of the RRBs, which was set up in the year 1975. So this is also what is important. Later the government came up with NABARD, which was the bank for the loans to the agriculture and rural development, and this was what was set up in the year 1988. So these are the steps that the government took in the interest of the rural areas and increasing the banking sector in the rural areas, penetration of banks in the rural areas. So that is one thing that is important. It's a brief history that has been provided in this particular editorial. Next, the editorial is highlighting about the growth rates. Now primarily it was feared that if banks are going to be nationalized, then it might impact the growth of the country. It might happen that this might be taken as a negative by the corporate sector, and development of the country might get impacted. So there were a number of naysayers to this concept of nationalization, but the editorial is saying that contrary to all the claims, the growth rates increased only, and instead of falling, the growth rates increased, which showed that it is not that when loans are to be given to a small number of people, rather the loans which are given to a large number of people will help increase the growth rate. So that is what happened. The rural economy prospered. So that is another analysis that was offered here. Another thing that has been discussed is the idea of redistribution goals. Now we all know India has this ideology of redistribution in the country, where the rich are taxed and the money from the rich is what is transferred to the poor through social sector schemes. So in these goals also, the banking sector and the nationalization of the banks has aided the government. So that is what has been discussed. However, what happened in the year 1991, we all know the LPG reforms are what came out in the year 1991, and it was under these particular reforms that the government had decided that it will not any further. It was the committee that was formed, which was the Narasimhan committee, and as per this committee, it was decided that the government will no more go ahead with the idea of allowing these kind of limitations on the bank and more freedom is what is going to be given to the banks as per the Narasimhan committee and also under the liberalization goals. So what the editorial is saying, that all the achievements that the banks had achieved from the year primarily 1969 to 1990 were reversed, unfortunately, and that is one thing that the government had to suffer from. So that is one analysis which has been offered in the context of the Narasimhan committee. Another analysis is with regards to the new branch authorization policy. This was again a policy that the government came up with. This was a policy that came up in the year 2004. As I told you, because of the steps that were taken backwards since 1969 to 1990, there was improvement that happened in the banking sector, primarily because of nationalization. Then after that, Narasimhan committee suggested that banks need to be given more freedom. They should be able to decide for themselves where they need to set up a branch or not. So in this context, there were some steps that were taken back by these banks. For instance, rural branches were what were stopped, which were shut down. Agriculture credit is what decreased. So this is what the government later realized way back in the year 2004, and that time the government came up with this new branch authorization policy, under which it further strengthened the norms and regulations on the banks, and this further led to increase in rural branches and agriculture credit. So this editorial is largely not very analytic, but largely a summary of entire steps that were taken in the banking sector. It becomes important for us. From two perspectives it becomes important. First is for the economy perspective of General Studies paper 3. That is where in the economy section such kind of a question can come. You should be aware of this major development in the context of the banking sector. Another importance is in the pre-independence history, in the post-independence history, that is where the importance is, because this is a major event in that particular context. So there you have to be prepared with this one topic and you can expect it as a question. So that's about this particular article. Coming to the next article, knee jerk. Now this is context with regards to the reaction of Pakistan to the Article 370. I found 2-3 points important here, so that is why I picked it up. Otherwise, nothing much. We all know Pakistan is objecting to India's decision of making Jammu and Kashmir a UT and for annulling major points under Article 370 and for completely doing away with Article 35A. So that is the context. Coming to the issues which have been discussed, the first issue is with regards to this being a knee-jerk reaction. The Pakistan government has given several knee-jerk reactions. It has reacted to this decision by the Indian government, which has not gone well with Pakistan elite. Also, Pakistan leaders are criticizing it and they have come up with several knee-jerk reactions. For example, the High Commissioner has been expelled, trade ties have been suspended with India. Also, the matters what will be taken to the UN is what has been said by Pakistan. So these are the steps that Pakistan has said. What will be the impacts of these steps is again something that is important. The expulsion of the High Commissioner is something that is usual between India and Pakistan now. So this is already, both countries are against the Vienna Convention on Diplomacy. So that is one thing that cannot be taken too seriously. In the context of trade, this is again something that India had already suspended, and this is going to have more negative impact on Pakistan only because Pakistan is importing more from India rather than India being more dependent on Pakistan. So the impact will be minimal. Coming to the UN, here what is important is that India's clout in UN is already increased. You should know that no major foreign power has criticized India's decision. India has increased in its economic clout globally, and that is why India's status in the UN has improved. Already I told you India has become a non-permanent seat holder in the United Nations Security Council also for 2 years. So it is something that will not impact India adversely much. So that is what is important. Also in the context of Article 371, analysis is what has been given in the editorial. Here the editorial is saying that when Pakistan in the past has never ever acknowledged Article 370, it had always said that it doesn't recognize Article 370, it doesn't recognize the fact that Jammu and Kashmir is what is a part of India. So how will it ever recognize that Article 370 is what is a part of Indian Constitution? So when it has never acknowledged Article 370, how is it that Pakistan now is objecting to the removal of this article which it never ever acknowledged only in the past? So that is one hypocritical stand of Pakistan which is being exposed. So these are some continuation actually to the entire episode. So our update on this is what was available, and that is why I picked it up for discussion. So that's about this particular article. Coming to the next article, cycle of extremes. This is in context to the disaster management techniques and the several disasters that are primarily taking place in India. We all know that the monsoons are a time of several disasters, either droughts or floods, and that is what is taking place in the monsoon. Just pre-monsoon time was what was appearing like a drought-like area, drought-like time. It was more of water scarcity, and suddenly when the monsoon has come, it has resulted in heavy flooding across the country. So that is what is the disasters that have taken place. The issue is that of climate change. Basically what happens is that previously rainfall used to take place like this, but it used to take place over several days, 1, 2, 3, 4 or 5, 6 days it used to take place. So intensity of the rainfall used to be comparably less. Now what is happening is that not only rainfall is taking place erratically, it is taking place at a higher intensity in one day only. So that is what is resulting in the flood. So that is what is important. Another thing that the editorial is offering here is the idea of some solutions. Now one thing that you need to know here is that several solutions that are there. If you will provide some technical language, you will be rewarded, and that technical language is what is offered in the editorials. So try and make some points, some keywords, so that you can use them. So that is what is the importance of this particular article. In the solutions, first solution is rainwater harvesting. We all know that if India is facing severe rainfall, then if it is harvesting this rainwater, then that can be a boon for India. India faces drought-like periods during summer also. So what is important is that this infrastructure be created. Also traditional knowledge of rainwater harvesting in the form of bodies and such kind of wells that were there in the past, some tanks that were there, is what the government should focus upon. Another thing that is required is safety audit. What has basically happened is that some vulnerable buildings are being crashed, and you should know that now it is under the climate change. What is happening is that not only the rain is those areas which are which are known for having high rainfall are definitely experiencing high rainfall, but also rain shadow areas. For instance, recently in Tamil Nadu, Coimbatore, which was in the rain shadow area, has experienced several very heavy rainfall. One of the railway stations there, one of the railway services building in Coimbatore got washed away. So in that particular context, the editorial is highlighting that safety audit of these buildings is what should be done, and all the vulnerable buildings should be recognized and retrofitting should be done in them to prevent losses. So that is one solution. Also, the government should invest in reliable infrastructure. There is need to increase urban resilience is what the editorial is offering. So these are the steps which are required. Another analysis is in the context of the case of Chennai. Now what has been highlighted in the editorial is that lessons have not been learnt in India. We all know that Chennai faced severe floods, urban flooding just few years back, but still what has happened in Chennai is that a police station was what was constructed on the lake bed. And what has happened because of this is that if on the lake bed only the police station is being constructed, then it is more prone to flood. Not only that, the lake bed is the region where waters recharge, it reaches the aquifers. That again does not happen. So all of this is what is continuing in India. The guidelines that have been offered to India in the context of disaster management are not being followed. So that is what has been talked about in the editorial. Indeed, disaster management is a relevant topic for us. So in that context, this can be an important article. So that's the importance. Coming to the next article, a leaf out of China's playbook. I personally did not find this particular article very important. It is talking about a comparison between China and India, and this kind of a comparison I don't think you will be very relevant. You will not have much scope of discussing such kind of a comparison in the context of article 370 basically, as has been done in this particular editorial. So for this article basically is just, I have just picked it up for discussion because it was what was available in the Hindu, and I did not want to avoid an article so that none of the students should feel that a major article was avoided. So that is the reason I am discussing it. Now first and foremost, the editorial is highlighting that the comparison between India and China is what is unfair. It is not a valid comparison. Now why is this comparison unfair? Is first and foremost it is unfair is because both the countries are very much different. It is almost like comparing apples and oranges. China is known for its authoritarian rule, India is known for its democratic rule, and despite the fact both countries have similar challenges, they deal in a different manner. But in the context of article 370, the comparison is what is being made that India and China have almost dealt in the same way. Even China would have dealt in such a way, in such kind of an undemocratic way. So the larger context in comparison is that India has acted in an undemocratic way in the context of article 370. So the article is criticizing India. Also two miracles are what have been talked about, which I found were relevant. First miracle is that for China the miracle has been its economic growth. The way China has grown economically has been a major miracle for China. Whereas in the context of India, what is the miracle is? The context for India, the miracle is that India has maintained its unity in diversity, which is a major achievement. How many countries could do that is what the editorial is highlighting, and that is the miracle that has been talked about. Not an important article, but yes, you can draw a comparison with China, but I wouldn't suggest that you should draw such kind of a comparison in your answers. It will not be appreciated. So that's about this particular article, and that's about our discussion today. I thank you all for watching the video.